The Dig on Netflix tells the true story of Basil Brown and his work to excavate a series of burial mounds on Edith Pretty's Sutton Hoo estate in 1939. Brown discovered a 7th century Anglo-Saxon burial ship that is considered to be one of the greatest archaeological finds in English history. In the movie, Ralph Fiennes portrays amateur archaeologist Basil Brown, and Carey Mulligan portrays Edith Pretty, the owner of the Sutton Hoo estate where the dig takes place. In this video, I'm going to unearth the Dig true story to tell you what is fact and what is fiction in the Netflix movie. This is The Dig, History versus Hollywood. One of the most significant differences between the Dig movie and the true story is that the real-life Dig actually unfolded across 2 seasons. It happened in the summer of 1938 and the spring and summer of 1939. In the movie, the entire excavation is condensed into 1 season in 1939, ending at the outbreak of World War II. This is significant because in the movie, Ralph Fiennes' character is taken entirely by surprise when he discovers the 7th century Anglo-Saxon burial ship in Mound 1 in 1939. However, the real Basil Brown wasn't as surprised by the discovery of the Anglo-Saxon ship because he had already excavated Mound 2 and Mound 4 the previous season in the summer of 1938. While excavating Mound 2, he discovered a much smaller boat that appeared to have been cut in half, with one half placed on top of the other as a cover. However, the top half was missing, suggesting the site had been looted. He did find some of the boat's rivets, suggesting that it might have been from the Anglo-Saxon period. When he returned the following year and found similar rivets for the much larger burial ship in Mound 1, he wasn't as surprised. Like in the movie, Carey Mulligan's character, Edith Pretty, was indeed a widow at the time she hired local archaeologist Basil Brown to excavate the mounds on her Sutton Hoo estate. Edith Pretty's husband, Frank Pretty, had died of stomach cancer on his 56th birthday in 1934 when their son Robert was roughly 4 years old. Robert, who's depicted by Archie Barnes in the movie, seems to be portrayed accurately, at least from what we know regarding his interest in the excavation. Watching the dig unfold was a great source of excitement for young Robert, who could be seen excavating with a toy spade around the site. When Professor Martin Carver's team re-excavated Mound 2 in 1987, they found a pair of Robert's roller skates buried in the soil at the base of the backfill from the previous excavation. One of the biggest liberties that the movie takes with Carey Mulligan's character is that despite aging the actress a little with makeup, she is approximately 20 years younger than the real Edith Pretty was at the time of the excavation. Carey Mulligan was approximately 34 years old when the Dig movie was filmed, and Edith Pretty was around the age of 55 when the excavation on her Sutton Hoo property took place. In the Dig movie, Edith Pretty invites her cousin, Rory Lomax, to come and photograph the excavation. Rory is portrayed by actor Johnny Flynn, and while there, he develops a romance with archaeologist Peggy Piggott, who is there with her husband, Stuart Piggott, to help on the excavation. It is certainly here that the film deviates the most from the true story. Rory's romance with Peggy, which finds them professing their love for one another before he heads off to war, is entirely fictional. In fact, Johnny Flynn's character, Rory Lomax, is entirely fictional as well. Edith Pretty didn't have a real-life cousin named Rory Lomax. The movie falsely implies that Peggy Piggott had just gotten married to Stuart Piggott and that they had interrupted their honeymoon to join the excavation. In reality, Peggy and Stuart had been married for 3 years at that point, having tied the knot in 1936. In the movie, Peggy comes to realize that the main reason that her marriage to Stuart Piggott is floundering is because Stuart is a closeted gay man. She points out that he's more interested in working in the lab with John Brailsford than spending time with her. While Stuart and Peggy Piggott's marriage did eventually end in divorce in 1954, we found no evidence that Stuart Piggott was a gay man, nor did their marriage end for that reason. Also, the movie implies that the lead archaeologist, Charles Phillips, chose Peggy Piggott simply because she was small and petite. This doesn't line up with the real reason why Peggy Piggott was chosen to work on the excavation at Sutton Hoo. In reality, Peggy Piggott was an experienced archaeologist who had worked on previous digs and who was a postgrad archaeologist and published scholar. One of the more intense scenes in the movie is when we see one of the burial mounds cave in on Ralph Fiennes' character, Basil Brown. After they uncover him, Edith Pretty performs CPR to bring him back to life. While it makes for a suspenseful moment in the film, the true story lacks any record of Basil Brown being nearly buried alive. The closest thing we found to that scene was a mention that there was worry that a hill of sandy soil that had acted as a viewing platform could give way. In the Dig movie, there are some flirtations with romance between Carey Mulligan and Ralph Fiennes' characters. The two connect over their love of archaeology, and we even see Edith Pretty invite Basil Brown to dinner at her house. This fleeting romance between Basil Brown and Edith Pretty appears to have no basis in history. From what we can tell, their relationship was never more than platonic. Basil Brown's wife, Dorothy Mae Brown, even wrote a letter to Edith Pretty, thanking her for giving her husband the chance to work on the Sutton Hoo excavation. In the movie, Edith Pretty goes to London to see a specialist, and we learn that because she had rheumatic fever as a child, it caused damage to the valves in her heart. While the real Edith Pretty was indeed known to be ill and frail, the cause seems to be largely unknown. We do know that the real Edith Pretty died just 3 years after the excavation, in 1942, after suffering a stroke. Her son Robert, who was just 12 years old at the time, went to live with his mother's sister, his Aunt Elizabeth. While a 1939 inquest had determined that the Sutton Hoo treasure belonged to Edith Pretty, it's true that she did donate it to the British Museum. The 7th century Anglo-Saxon treasure that had been found on her Sutton Hoo estate was stored in subway tunnels during World War II to protect it from air raids. Edith Pretty died before ever getting to see it on display at the British Museum. If you want to learn more about the true story and the significance of the artifacts found in the Sutton Hoo ship burial, check out our article over on historyversushollywood.com that's linked in the description below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Anchors away, my friends.